Good morning, folks. Welcome to Accessible Archives' American County Histories webinar. We may have some stragglers that come in, but we're going to go ahead and get started. This webinar is brought to you by Unlimited Priorities. And Unlimited Priorities provides a variety of services for accessible archives. We deal with the content and production, sales and marketing, also licensing for accessible archives. If you have any questions about accessible archives or Unlimited Priorities, please feel free to contact myself, Robert Lester, or Iris Haney at unlimitedpriorities.com. Let's do a quick overview and the agenda. What we'll do is we'll start out by talking about accessible archives. Then we'll jump to the value to be found in American County Histories with our presenter, Jill O'Neill today. We will also have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. Please note that we do have this PowerPoint as a handout, so certainly feel free to download it. And without further ado, let's talk a little bit about accessible archives. Primary sources document the past. Aside from human memory and the unrecorded passing down of information from generation to generation, histories based upon primary sources are really the only way the current generation can hope to understand what happened before. The primary source materials contained in accessible archives' online databases provide broad views across more than 200 years of American history and culture, focusing on the 18th and the 19th and very early 20th centuries. Accessible archives databases provide full text searches, digital images, and complete rekeyed text. Accessible archives collections permit users to spend more time exploring documents and less time searching for them. Please note the number of disciplines that can use accessible archives to support the classroom, research, and general interest learning. Reference librarians, genealogists, students, faculty, historians, and researchers can trace the development of America from the 18th century through the early 20th century. Accessible archives collections create endless possibilities for new and more thorough research. And now, let's get on with the webinar. I'd like to present Jill O'Neill, who is the Educational Programs Manager for the National Information Standards Organization. She will be our presenter today. Jill, take it away.
Well, thank you, Bob, for that very kind introduction. I want to talk a little bit about what value is to be found in these types of American county histories. The best approach as information professionals is to ensure that those who come to us asking for assistance, that we direct them to the right set of resources that we may be able to provide access to, so that they have their own information needs satisfactorily met. And what makes it interesting is that county histories have a kind of a threefold value, really. There is the personal value, where an individual may want to use these publications to trace a genealogical family line. There is the historical value that represents documentation for historical figures, and I'll talk a little bit about a use case where they've been used to document 19th century women writers. They also give an indication of what life was like at a particular point in time, and that also gives us an indication of how the community or the region saw itself, what the perspectives were, what the attitudes and values of, at a particular point in history were in place at that time. So this is why these historically contemporary accounts can be so valuable to individual researchers. Because value is derived from the user's task, it's good to know what types of information you can find. There's a broad spectrum of content that can be uncovered, as this slide indicates. The experience and impact of a major weather event, the shifts and makeup of a particular population, regional routes of transportation that play into the long-term economic development of an area. County histories may be if not the, primary source of information for this type of data regarding a locale, a community, or an institution. Now, without going into an exhaustive history, it might be useful to know something of the background of this particular genre. County histories were actually initially published in Great Britain back in the 16th century. For North America, the initial history is usually attributed to Governor William Bradford of Plymouth Plantation. And for a variety of reasons, it wasn't until the 1870s and 1880s, when the country was celebrating its centennial, that there was a huge push to celebrate local history and the accomplishments of the citizens of that region. So those types of books had a subscription-based model, so they tended to document the lives of leading citizens who would then be willing to subscribe or purchase the publication for their personal libraries. That's how they earned the nickname of the mug book. But it's also important to remember that economics played an important part of what areas of the country were most immediately documented. Some regions, such as the Midwest, you can find a number of different available county histories. Other parts of the country, particularly in the South, following the economic depression following the Civil War, there are fewer available county histories. So it helps to have a sense of what region you have an interest in and what the likelihood of availability can be. If you have an interest, I do recommend an article, Every Man His Own Biography, that was published by the American Antiquarian Society. It gives a really interesting type of history. And the other thing to recognize is that in more recent years, county histories may have been commissioned on the basis of other concerns and released under different business models. For example, in the 1950s, the John Drury Company released county histories for the state of Illinois that featured low-altitude aerial photography of the region, having to do with land values and existing structures. And that was a particular value add as a form of documentation. The business model was less reliant on subscription sales to individuals, and rather it went to businesses and libraries. So again, the actual nature of the content included in these publications has also shifted with time. So what are the possible use cases? Well, one that I know of personally was a researcher, an academic researcher, who used accessible archives to document hidden historical figures. She had a specific specialty of 19th century women authors, particularly writing for children. And she found Accessible Archives American County History Collection to be of use to her in corroborating the life of a woman who might otherwise not have gotten a good deal of attention. The student in the classroom will also find accessible archives, American County History, to be useful, because in a history course, you may want to look around and see what you find, for example, about quarantine practices in colonial ports. And county histories can actually provide that type of insight. And also, perhaps less considered, is the value of county histories to professionals outside of the academic realm. So these might be people working for a chamber of commerce, or perhaps a marketing person who is working in the repositioning of an institution or organization, and they will find county histories useful in order to reposition and market their location in order to attract new business. So if you are that academic researcher beginning research, the assumption is she's going to swing past the library. And you, as an information professional, may already be aware that there are 3 major bibliographic resources that currently are available. All of these have references listed in WorldCat so that you can find the most locally available county history. But beyond that, the academic may also be aware of special collections held by a university, many of which have taken on the role of digitizing historical records. In this instance, the University of Wisconsin at Stout has made official county records searchable. But one of the caveats in this type of instance is being sure that the user understands the scope of what a particular collection holds. In this particular instance, the resource includes circuit court records, county court records, probates, naturalizations, and funeral records. But it really includes records from just 3 counties, which is important to know when you consider the state of Wisconsin actually has 72 counties at all. So it's a restricted degree of digital availability. Now, again, in our instance, the researcher is looking specifically at documenting the biography of a particular woman, a person whose status might not be immediately visible in searching formal legal records. So how does she start? Well, as it happens, she knew that the woman was the wife of a particular member of the clergy. She knew his name and the town of residence. So in this instance, she knew to go directly to Accessible Archives and searched for the county of Worcester in the state of Massachusetts. So she was able to begin with something of an advantage. And sure enough, she was able to pull up the history of Worcester County, Massachusetts, with biographical sketches of many of its pioneers and prominent men, volume 2. Now, what makes that neat is that because of that, the blurb that was included, she was able to ascertain his Civil War record, the military unit to which he was assigned, the name of his church in Worcester, and a death date, all of which would have an impact on his wife's living circumstances and subsequent activity. So she not only was able to determine where this woman would have been living, but also the point at which her life circumstances would have changed. So, and in this instance, Mrs. Edward Ashley Walker wrote under her own name of Catherine Kent Child Walker. You can see the graphic photograph in the lower left-hand corner, again, an example of an image that she was able to locate and include in her output. And what's interesting to note here is that she may not, even though a user or a researcher may not document the use of a particular resource, this particular researcher told me that she used the content found in the county history to corroborate what she needed to know. And in this instance, that was a really important element because it was one of the few areas where she could corroborate the needed information. Now, our second use case was that of the history student who had an interest in finding information regarding yellow fever in the Mid-Atlantic region and subsequent quarantine practices. And we're all aware that students probably will begin with Google. In this instance, the student had used the phrase yellow fever and two additional terms, quarantine and at Philadelphia, which was a noted port in the Mid-Atlantic region. And you can see that he's looked at some of those results, including a mix of sources. There's Wikipedia. There at the very top, there's an item from the public television station. Further down, there's something called PhiladelphiaEncyclopedia.com. And if the student has scanned the various clips, he may be made aware of a particular term, the lazaretto. But it's entirely possible that the student is concerned about whether those sources will be considered acceptable to the instructor or even sufficiently detailed for satisfying the student's own curiosity. In such a case, the student might turn to an information resource such as American County History in order to further drill down. And one of the virtues of starting out with a resource such as this is the options offered for managing the scope of content that is to be searched and evaluated. We all know that part of the reason that people have trouble with Google is that they are overwhelmed with results. In this instance, the user is actually presented with some choices so that they can refine what they want to search. And in this instance, the student might choose to run the query across a particular slice of the resource, whether that be publication type, newspapers, books, or county histories. They have an option to select a particular collection and even narrow it down to a specific date. And having determined that he wants to investigate the county histories, even more useful is the ability to narrow down to a specific state. It allows a degree of control over what is actually searched, because the user may want to do more than simply look at Pennsylvania. He may well want to see what is available from Delaware or North Carolina, Virginia, a variety of locations. So as he's moving through, he's now gotten to a point where, without necessarily having to specify as part of his search query, he's looking at two particular counties in the Pennsylvania region, the Philadelphia County and the County of Delaware in Pennsylvania. What makes this interesting is that the student can then look over to the center section, see that there's information about the medical profession. There's something there about the township of Tinicum. And if he links through, he is taken to the real payoff. There's a greater degree of detail and local color in describing the factors that went into moving the quarantine station for the city of and port of Philadelphia to an area called Tinicum. And it also shows the ongoing concerns at the time about the need to quarantine incoming ships even before they reach the port of Philadelphia. And what makes this particularly useful, particularly to the less experienced user, is the clean and high quality presentation of the text. it's encouraging to both students as well as our earlier researcher that they have access to two ways of seeing the content: as text that has been rekeyed in, which is what you see here, and also as a scanned page. The latter means that the student is not put off or by unfamiliar layouts, and the researcher has the benefit of seeing content in the full context of the original page, which can also be important. Now, our third use case was that of the regional professional who might need to use this type of information. And again, that individual is probably going to start out at the local library. And I think it's worthwhile to note that many state and public libraries have assembled at least the starting points for someone who may be seeking information about genealogical history or local history. And in this instance, you can see I've shown resources that one can locate through the Maryland Public Library. And on the right-hand side, there's a very simple document that has been created by a library in Illinois to assist with local family and local history. But the other place where many users may visit is going to be a historical society. And again, the critical element is that you need to use a variety of resources. And the local or state historical society can frequently be a good place as a starting point. In this instance, we're looking at the Kansas Historical Society, and this looks as if it could be helpful to a user. There's a map with a particular county highlighted. In this case, it's Montgomery County, and there appears to be some depth here. So maybe the user decides they're going to explore a little bit more. And here we're looking at a history bibliography that's been created for users, and it does in fact indicate that there are ways of looking at it on a regional basis. What makes this useful is that if you are someone who is trying to reposition the marketing of a particular institution or organization, this can be useful to point you in a very general direction. But of course, the problem here is that they're not really linked resources, and there's no annotation to really indicate to the user exactly what might be useful to them. Now, and again, this is where a commercial database may provide the type of information that the professional needs. The user can, with minimal thought applied, get to the right county in the right state. Again, we're looking at the American County Histories. We're specifically looking at Montgomery County. And there in the very first result, you'll see there is an entire chapter on the medical profession in Montgomery County. And if the user clicks through, they then can see some very specific information about what led to the founding of a local medical school, the faculty at the time, their specialties. But there's also information there, and it may not be particularly clear on this slide, I'm not quite sure. There's evidence as well of the cultural attitude of the time towards the local Native population and the extent of their medical knowledge. So this regional professional may well want to note that perhaps she needs to be careful in how that less positive aspect of the school start might be handled. And again, this screenshot actually makes clear how the user can choose to view the text. In the upper part of that page, you can see that there are selections where you can go to previous pages, you can go to previous chapters, and in fact, you can actually get to the page image of page 155 there. So to wrap up very quickly, what we as information professionals are trying to do is to simply remain aware of the wealth of resources that may be available to someone doing this type of work. There is what is available on the web, and that shouldn't be discounted, but also there's a good deal of wealth beyond the web, which can be found in those printed bibliographies and in the various online information resources, such as American County Histories. And in those instances, again, in helping the patron, you want to be aware of what the scope of a particular resource is, the searchability, the indexing quality, how closely is that text indexed. We saw that in the search examples, the keywords were highlighted for easy review of the content. And there's also you want to be sure that the bibliographic control is what is necessary. So I hope this has served as a useful, brief overview of what types of resources can be available, and in just showing you a little bit of the value of the American County Histories. And with that, I'm going to turn the podium back over to Bob and see if there are any questions from the audience.
Thank you, Jill. Now that are there any, if you have any questions, please feel free to set them up. You can, let's see if I can undo all of these. Okay. Please feel free to, if you have a question, hopefully we can get these all undone and you all can ask a question, shout out, or you can use the chat box.
I do think it's important to note that a region's individual resources will be very much dependent upon conditions over the course of history. Again, I thought it was personally very interesting to discover that certain portions of the country are better documented through these county histories than others. But it's also worth noticing that American County Histories is gathering as comprehensive a collection of all of the counties in the United States as might be desirable.
I invited everybody that's got a microphone and they're typing, you know, and hearing it.
Sorry about that. We do have one question about title lists that can be sent out. We do actually, if you go on our website, we do provide a variety of lists for our county histories. And I will have the link that or you can contact me at robert.lester@limitedpriorities.com. And I will also have that information shortly also.
Part of that question, Bob, I see is whether or not we've done an overlap analysis with openly available digitized resources. And again, I think because each region is going to have a different set of available resources, That's a research project that would certainly benefit
that is something that we can certainly try. At this point, I don't think we have, but maybe some sort of analysis that we can provide in the future. Jill?
I think the point is that it's something that should be done on a regional basis, because what is going to be available, for example, in the state of Wisconsin, may be very different from what's going to be available in the context of other regions of the country. So I think really that's that type of overlap analysis would be most efficiently done at the local or regional level.
Okay. We can certainly work on that. And once we are done with something like that, we will provide it on our website, accessible-archives.com. Are there any additional questions?
Well, I see one with regard to what areas of the U.S.
Yes.
has more county histories. And again, this is not something that I'm really able to address definitively, but that Hannah article to which I referred you does actually talk about the fact that the Midwest during this period of the American Centennial put a lot of emphasis into publishing those types of county histories, whereas other parts of the country may not have done so. Again, what's important to recognize is that American County Histories as a collection from Accessible Archives actually has brought together county histories for all of the 50 states. Some are currently in the process of being cleaned up for inclusion, but again, this is something that needs to be looked at very much on a local level.
Yes, and I would also comment on that. States, the eastern states, and certainly the central states, probably will have the largest number, simply because the states themselves, right, have been around a lot longer. We do have county histories for Hawaii and Alaska, but there's a very small number of those. So during the 19th century, which was kind of the formulating period for county histories, so many more were written about the eastern states and certainly the central states of Ohio, Indiana, certainly Michigan. They are around. Some of these county histories were really written for kind of a local audience, and they may have been published very, very locally. And what we've done is we've actually gone and searched out those kind of local county histories, ones that may not have been available very far outside of a particular county, and we have included those in our collection. But I will say that California is well represented in our American County Histories collection. And those folks from South Dakota, we actually have all of the county histories extant in our American County Histories collection. The reason I know that is I was looking through the South Dakota county histories just recently. Are there any additional questions? Let's see what we got. Okay. Well, I think we've answered the questions. If you have any questions, further questions about American County histories or accessible archives, please feel free to contact Iris Haney, and here's her contact information. Or you can contact me, and you would just change that to robert.lester@unlimitedpriorities.com. And if you have any questions for Jill, just let us know, and we will pass those along to her. And I'd like to thank you all for attending our webinar today. Again, please feel free. You can still submit questions, and we will answer them promptly. Please note that we do have a handout. We do have this PowerPoint available. Please feel free to download. If you have run out of time and you had to leave early, then we can always send the PowerPoint to you. Thank you again. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it very much.
And everyone have a great day and a great week. Thank you.